In terms of the panel, I am joined by the experts who have done the presentations, and there is also the deputy chair of the asset management chapter, who is Karl. So I'll briefly tell you who Karl is, and from there we'll then start looking at the questions which were typed on the chat, as well as discussing this digital transformation that is coming and discussing how it's relevant to municipalities. So to let you know who Karl is, Karl graduated in electronic engineering from Stellenbosch University in 1978. After starting a career in Siemens, he worked on high technology defense projects until 1992, where he joined forces with Pragma. There, his experience and methodologies of systems engineering led him to what became known as physical asset management, which was since formalized in ISO 55000 standard. Following a good number of engineering and business management duties in Pragma, Karl returned to professional consultation. He believes that asset management must be an essential part of an organization's business strategy to create structure and order in the long-term utilizing stage of the lifespan of assets. This is especially applicable to the long-term infrastructure as found in the public and private utilities, where much of the value of new projects can be repeatedly be lost by lack of appropriate care and discipline. So some of his recent experiences includes the Renewable Energy IPP procurement program, which he has been involved in it since 2015 to current. The Global SA, where he has been involved from 2016 to current. And in terms of specialization, he's got some specialization in physical asset management business solutions, covering complete asset lifecycle management in accordance to ISO 55000, GFMAM, Pragma, as well as the AMIP framework. Applications of the asset management concepts, processes, practices in private and public utilities with special interest in the renewable energy sector. Reliability, maintainability, and safety engineering design and validation of complex systems, system engineering, including the analysis of user requirements and formulation of system performance requirements. He is a member of SAIEE, which he is a deputy chair for, a member of Amar, as well as the Institute of Asset Management in UK. So that is Karl. Welcome, colleagues. So let's kick off the panel discussion. So in terms of the panel discussion, what we are going to be linking the discussion to, it's recognizing that the asset management practice is expected to be more digital in future. So we are going to discuss some of the elements of that digital transformation. So that is what we are going to be discussing. So as a start, let's firstly look at some of the questions which were typed in the chat and see if we can be able to address some of these questions. So the first question, which was posted here, let me just quickly go to it here. So there's a question from George here, and George is saying, is all good and well in a stable environment? How is theft and vandalism handled? Currently, that is a bigger factor for municipalities. So I think as part of your presentation, Abdul, you touched slightly on vandalism. So maybe if you can just expand a bit to respond to George's question here.
Tebogo, can you just repeat the question? I'll speak about vandalism, but can you repeat the direct question about vandalism?
Okay. So George was saying it's all good and well in a stable environment. I think he's referring to the asset management approaches that were presented. And he's asking, how is theft and vandalism handled?
Yeah, I've seen this in municipalities that infrastructure, especially water-related infrastructure, is quite remote. water treatment plants, balls, etc. And also, wastewater treatment works, pump stations, etc. out in the field, quite rural and quite remote. And one of the areas that we established that is if you don't have a good grip of where your assets are and it's not recorded accurately, then you won't be able to manage the impacts and effects of vandalism. But also that we also record. I think more importantly is when we do maintenance that we actually, if you do the cause, the root cause analysis and of the breakdowns and failures, that you actually record the codes as vandalism so that you can actually interrogate how many cases of vandalism there are and how you can prevent that. I trust that would answer that, Tebogo.
Thanks, Abdul. Yeah.
Tebogo, can I come in here? I'd like to add to that answer a little bit.
Yeah, you're welcome to add, Archie.
And this is just from my perspective, okay? So when you look at the question, there are two components to it. One is a reactive side to it, and one is a proactive side. So let's deal with the reactive side. So theft, vandalism, illegal connections, meter tampering, all of those things are considered to be under the same umbrella. And all of those things result in some kind of service delivery that's impacted to the customer. And I think the way most organizations deal with that is to go out and investigate and repair and sort the problem out whenever it happens. I think the question is more directed at the magnanimity of this thing. And because it is such a huge problem, it doesn't just sit with one particular municipality, it's endemic. And for me, I think we need to look at what is the proactive approach to this thing. And unfortunately, in this situation here, the solution is not technical. You cannot go out and protect all your equipment out there with fail-safe devices and specialized ways of protecting the assets, the exposure to the assets. I believe what we are dealing with here is a social problem. And it's very, very closely linked to a political issue. And I would propose that for us to deal with this problem, we need to deal with the social ills, which, of course, the politicians need to be totally involved in. So that's my take on it, Tebogo. Thanks.
Yeah. No, thanks, Archie. Thanks, Abdul, as well, for the response to that question. So moving on to the next question. There's a question here for Floris, and there's from Melville. The question says, how were the financial benefits of outsourcing the maintenance work to Pragma initially quantified, motivated, and were these benefits realized as anticipated? How quickly did this strategy pay off? So that is the question, Floris.
Okay. Yes. No, it was very much quantified. You could see from the results the benefits that we had from it, but we used them in a manner on the things that we couldn't get to or where we didn't have staff to be able to do that. And then part of the contract was, in actual fact, to train our own staff up in the type of work they were doing. Like we had guys spend a lot of time with our staff doing root cause failure analysis. We always had staff involved when we did the roles and responsibilities document. They compiled the document, but in actual fact, we had operations and maintenance and all kinds of guys involved when the thing is drawn up. So we used them in very much as almost like a consultant, but a consultant with assets or with human bodies that could go with. The same is there when I started with the works orders and tracing them and tracking them and that. We had no planners, nor did we have positions for planners. So how do you effectively plan if you've got no planners? So we introduced planners from them. We did all the assessments with them. So the benefits were huge to the city. You can see by all the awards that came out from that particular exercise. I mean, we're the only municipality ever to have won the president of ISO, or SABS, I should say, a President's Award. No state entity or municipality ever achieved that in their entire history, and still today we're the only one that actually did that. And they played a huge integral role in that. I mean, if you look at the amount of work that we got through in that period of time was astronomical. The guys who were motivated, they got in, they did it, and a large portion of that was due to the fact that we used Pragma in that role. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, thanks, Floris, for that response. I think you were detailed. So moving on to the next question. So there's a question here from Clarice, indicating that important to know the project environment request is a combination for requesting the setup of platforms and a survey for KPI measurement. So it appeared to be a comment. However, if maybe you would like a response on that, Clarice, you're welcome to maybe just type in there and expand. So another question here, it says that I believe that asset management for municipality is a compliance issue, and but a lot of municipalities fail to prioritize it when budgeting. So how can the CFO and accounting officers be lobbied to think like engineers so that they commonly own importance of this system? So this one, let me hand it over to Archie.
Thanks, Tebogo. It's a very loaded question, and I just want to affirm the acronym AGSA. And if I'm wrong with it, please let me know. But I think it means the Attorney General of South Africa.
Auditor.
So yeah,
the Auditor General.
Auditor General, or yes, Auditor General might more like that. Yeah, I think the first statement is very, very pronounced in that we've seen results over the many years about audit reports, and very few municipalities actually, let's call it, comply to it. But how do you get engineers, or how do you get engineering mindset in the CFOs and the accounting officers? It's a very difficult thing. You cannot take them to go and study this thing. However, I believe that if the exposure on the assets that each of us, if we are employed in that space, the care for that asset is not just a maintenance guy's issue. If we start expanding the knowledge to the, let's call it, accounting officers, the CFOs, the HR people, the information management guys, make them aware about the importance of good asset management. And by bringing that, let's call it, perspective to them, it will give them a new dynamic of understanding how to invest and how to, or where to invest and put their money where it's supposed to matter mostly. So for me, it's not about just becoming compliant, because compliance requires various things to be done on the assets. But if in your asset care journey, if that has not been taken care of properly, if you don't have the right things to be done, if you don't have the right strategies, you don't have the right investment mix, if you don't have the right skills to do the work, I think all of those things need to be addressed in the whole suite of people that have the asset care journey. And it's not the maintenance manager's duty only, but it's a combination of other people involved. So my concluding summary for that lot would be to make other, let's call it, institutions in the municipality and leaders in those institutions, make them aware of asset management and the asset care that is required. Thanks, Tebogo.
Thanks, Archie.
Tebogo,
Karl here.
So-
Can I add to that?
Yes, Karl.
Very shortly. Firstly, asset management is not a pure engineering discipline. I think it's one of those that actually spans and bridges or breaks down silos if it is implemented properly and correctly, and typically in the way that Abdul explained, that with the DBSA, well, them being a financial institution, obviously they believe in asset management. But I believe this is the one area where financial discipline and technical engineering discipline actually comes together and need to come together to achieve the objectives. I think ISO 55000 itself states the purpose of asset management of realizing value from your assets. And I think that's a common objective for both engineers and CFOs, accounting officers alike. So this really should break down barriers if it is implemented in the right way, as the theories have explained.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Karl. Thanks, Archie, as well. So in summary, when you go through this journey, you have to take everyone with you. As well explained, it's not for one department or one area. It involves a whole lot of different areas within the organization. So the next question has been,
Teboho?
yes.
Can you see my hand is up, Teboho?
Yeah, I didn't see your hand, but yeah, you're welcome to comment, Abdul.
Okay, I think I want to, thanks to Archie and to Karl, they give the correct aspect, but I think the one question was really around compliance. And I'd like to answer that from a municipal perspective, because I kind of sit on the ground, you know. Cape Agulhas municipality for 8 straight years has received clean audit from the Auditor General of South Africa. But that doesn't mean our service, it reflects in service delivery. So there is a disconnect of what is being measured by the Auditor General of South Africa. I just want to share with my colleagues in the municipalities that physical infrastructure asset management is currently not being audited. They don't have the capacity, the AG of SA. If you look at the AG of New Zealand, just for your information, that they are starting to look at maintenance maturity. Have you got an asset maturity assessment? Have you got a SAMP in place? Have you got AMPs in place? So they actually starting to measure this now. So like Karl has mentioned, it's a multidisciplinary focus. Asset management is not the CFO, they look at asset management from GRAP 17, which is audited, the general recognizable accounting practices. They look at that plant, property and equipment that is audited by the AG, but not the ISO 55000. But in developed countries in the world, it is being audited. But I think we should start doing things properly, because not because it's being audited, because we need to do it as the common sense strategy. Thanks, Teboho.
Thanks, Abdul, for expanding and bringing in that compliance aspect. So the next question has been addressed to you, Floris, by Siyabonga. And it says, how did you manage to get buy-in from other departments and council? How did other stakeholders describe the workload? In other municipality, outsourcing is seen as a way of empowering SMMEs here. How do you approach that view as it's coming from council?
Okay, there's a number of things there. Getting buy-in from operations and maintenance is actually very, very difficult. I do a training course on planning and scheduling, and one of the big hiccups is always this ops versus maintenance. So you've got to tread carefully. And the way that we did to a large degree, we included them in everything that we did. Like when we did the roles and responsibilities, we had all the ops and all the maintenance guys together, and we thrashed out the issues going around that. So that has success, but also in some instances, you've got people that don't want to work with, and therefore your top echelons buy-in is absolutely critical. Your branch managers, your director, your ED has to buy in into your process from day one. If they don't, you're going to struggle. It becomes an uphill battle. but it does get overcome. Outsourcing is always going to be a part of maintenance. In the, what was it, the early 90s, middle 90s, there was a drive to get rid of all technical people across the country and worldwide, as a matter of fact. It was a time of Margaret Thatcher saying you don't need artisans anymore, you don't need artisan training schools anymore. Other outsourced can do the work far better and cheaper. So over the years, you lost quite a bit of technical skills, and hence the outsourcing then became a very viable option. The question is, what do you outsource? Do you outsource strategic stuff? My answer to that is no. You do what you can, and you need to also be aware of what your skill sets are of your own staff. If, for example, you're working with, say, white metal bearings on a particular piece of equipment and you do not have the capabilities within your structure, then that is something you would outsource. And then also, what I always used to say is I can do so much work with the amount of staff I have, but I've got at least another 50% more work that needs to be done. And that's the part that I normally focused on outsourcing. So the minute that 50% of dropped, so did the outsourcing drop. So you've got to be very aware of what you're outsourcing and very aware of your own capacity. Because if your jobs get too old, people lose faith in you as a maintenance division. And it has other implications. It has legal implications. It has faith in your work. It has everything comes. So you need to keep the work flowing. And the way that you keep the work flowing is that you can't do, you outsource. The other thing that's happened a lot in the municipality lately is all the compliance issues that the procurement guys have to deal with. So you have to have tenders in place, whether you like it or not, to be able to deal with that type of work. So where before there were other methods of procuring systems, now you've got to have tenders, and that again puts another challenge on the table. So yes, you've got to from day one work with everybody, and you've got to all agree on the type of outputs that you're looking at. And we started on policy, strategy, SAMs for each part of the business, and we worked from that. And our goal was to improve our outputs, and if the kill them with service was our motto. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I think, you were again thorough, Floris, basically indicating that you have to understand what is it that you need to outsource, what are the implications, is it something strategic? So you sort of run into that type of an analysis before you can actually get to outsource. But thanks, Floris. But just to maybe again remind that one of the things that we are actually discussing is this aspect of a future Munich operating into a digital environment. And we know that the digital transformation, it comes with the use of tools and systems. So a question to Archie is that which tools do you regard as enablers to this increasing digital future?
Thanks, Teboho. So when one looks at the digitalization of the future, I want to emphasize something that is going to be used in the interpretation of the information. So we can have various products such as handheld devices and iPhones and cameras and all of those things. And these are the tools that you require as part of your digitalization journey. All of those, all it does is it captures information, and then it needs to be transported, or it needs to be stored in what I would call a computerized maintenance management system, or your enterprise asset management system. So here you have the ambit of what needs to be done on the asset, the frequency of work that needs to be done, And I'm assuming that that's not too much of an effort in digitalization, but it's part of the process to get to the step for enabling the outcomes. So if you have an enterprise asset management system, and some of the names that are common out there are SAP and Maximo, the Pragma product, etc., all of them have information requirement. So you need to know where your assets are. You need to know what is the condition of your assets. You need to know what assets are maintainable. You need to know who are the asset owners, or let's call it the original equipment manufacturers. You need to know what do they recommend. You also need to know, through a reliability-centered maintenance approach, what maintenance activities should take place on that. All of these things can be supported through a, let's call it electronic modem to assist you. There were days when we moved from RCM on information sheets and decision algorithms done in a very manual way to now being software driven. So that's the one thing that will help you decide on what is the right or the best maintenance activity that needs to be performed on that asset. And that part of the digitization drive. Ultimately, what you want to achieve with digitalization is the ease of the workload on the human resource that is required out there. So if we, for example, take a non-digitalized environment where a technician is given a work order, that work order has to be handwritten. So if it is not coming out of an enterprise management system, it has to be coming out of an old CADIC system, which says he needs to go and do these 2 activities. It's a paper that has to be printed. He takes that, he goes and does the work that he gets. He brings that information to somebody that records it and then has to put it into the system. So I think we all have some form of digitalization at the moment. So your computerized maintenance management system, whether it is Excel or Maximo or whatever, stores some of that information. However, when one looks at the progression in the digitalization space and where you want to go, it is absolutely important that we have good information. And good information leads to good data, or let's say good data capturing and feedback, and what you have leads to good information. Good information will lead to good decision making.
Yeah, no, I think you are actually correct, Archie. I think mentioning having good data, but I think maybe just to expand on the question and actually hand it over to Teboho, is that actually using these tools, there is definitely going to be an increase in volumes of data that is going to be generated. So maybe a question to Teboho. Yeah, a question to Teboho will be, what are the implications of that increased volume of data and the quality thereof to the Munics? Thanks, Teboho.
Thank you, Chair. The important thing about data is that one is to make sure that you've got the tools that support it. In other words, proper databases that will assist you with it. We also need to make sure then that with that data, your people are trained and your people have the right skills to make sure that the information that they put in is of the right quality. Because if you put in junk, what you're going to get as an outcome will also be junk. So we need to make sure that as more data comes in, its accuracy is there. And then you've got proper servers and support to make sure that when you draw reports from these servers to make decisions, then you are able then to make the correct one that aligns with what is out there in your network. Thank you.
Great. And I think they normally say garbage in, garbage out. So certainly the quality of data, it has to be very good, because that will inform the decisions that you actually make to say whether are they good or they are actually suboptimal. So coming back to the questions, so there's a question here. And the question says, in SA, as a developing country, what LV asset management strategy is sustainable in the informal electrification distribution networks, given the unstructured environment and other challenges, including illegal connections, bypass meters, as well as theft. So let me pass this one to Abdul.
Thank you, Teboho. That's not the operational side is not really my specialty, but what I'm currently doing with a TID rollover, and maybe that's one of the good strategies, is that you actually do a full audit and maybe schedule a full audit on your meters. The TID rollover, you know, where the STS meters has to be reprogrammed for the 2024 deadline, has given us an opportunity to also do a complete meter audit. I think the days that I used to be a technician also, there's a standard around calibration of meters. So the very important thing to do is to have a schedule of maintenance to touch all your assets at least once a year. This is my my humble opinion that I want to share to my colleagues at the Munich level. If you're not, and we sometimes adopt a strategy of run to failure, especially with meters and stuff like that. But I'd say at least touch your assets once a year. If you can't for a meter audit, because some metropolitans have like 500,000, even 2 million prepaid meters, is to do some sectionalization, some regional blocks, and say that you're going to do an inspection and a complete audit on your meters. And you know, I normally, from the SARPA side, I normally hear that, you know, your prepaid meters or your cash registers of your revenue, and this is all about revenue protection and preservation. So if the money is leaking from the till, then you have to schedule the maintenance around doing a complete meter sweep and meter audit to investigate meter tampering. That's my response to that, Teboho.
Yeah.
Can I assist Teboho to Abdul Teboho?
Yeah, I was definitely about to say Abdul has addressed the metering side of it, but I thought maybe Archie, as you have dealt with LV as well, you can maybe come in and expand on the strategy in terms of the approach for the LV.
So Mr. Bangi, Ed, it's good to hear the question coming from you. When one looks at the LV networks that we've got in South Africa, and I'll refer now to my days when I worked in Eskom, there's close to about 600,000 kilometers of LV network feeding probably 6 million customers. And I might be under correction in terms of the latest update. The typical LV strategy would be for you to go and do preventative maintenance on all of those networks. However, we know for a fact that with the limited resources that we have out there, and not just people, you have vehicles, tools, your materials, etc., it is impossible to do proper preventative maintenance on all 600,000 kilometers and all 6 million customers. If we look at the age profile of our LV networks from 1991, since the early days of electrification, when Ian Morgan and the other gentleman, I forget his name, they said electricity for all. There was a huge drive in Eskom to electrify as many people, or provide electricity to as many people as possible. And that was done with the intention of bringing a better quality of life to people. That came with its own complications in terms of cost reduction in capital expenditure, and at that stage, we went for least cost. So what we're sitting with now since 1991, which is probably what, 30 odd years ago, 32 years ago, is infrastructure that has aged. And at that time, there was no preventative maintenance strategy, and it has since, of course, devolved. So when one looks at a strategy to improve service delivery in the LV environment, what is currently happening is reactive or reactive maintenance. When failures occur, customers phone in and staff are called out to go and repair faults. I think what needs to happen is we need to look at this entire ambit and say how old and how bad the condition of these assets are, and use asset health indicators that Teboho has created, where you have red, green, and yellow colors to indicate the worst performing feeders, those customer villages or segments where there are the largest number of failures, we have enough digitalization at the moment to tell us where our faults are coming from. So we could do a heat map and using the number of faults, identify which areas of the networks are requiring the highest amount of attention. Do a quick inspection and identify what needs to be done to correct it. And then rather than looking at OPEX cost, rather than looking at maintenance to restore that network to its condition where it can deliver almost a designed intent, we need to start reinvestment in either refurbishment or new networks, or tear down the networks and rebuild it. And we have to start that. You know, if we don't start the reinvestment, we're going to find a big, let's call it, chunk of the maintenance budget being thrown away because we're not focusing our efforts on end-of-life management correctly. And we are hoping that a truck that is now 30 years old, completely broken down, and you're changing your oil, you're changing the water, you're changing the plugs, you're changing the tire, is going to deliver the service that it should have delivered when it was brand new. And I think that's the misnomer we need to clear here. Whether it is LV, whether it is MV, whether it is HV, you need to start the right investment at the right time. Thanks, Teboho.
Great, thanks, Archie. I think, yeah, it was very detailed. So in terms of the time, I think we have 8 minutes left. So I think, yeah, maybe let's address, say, 1 or 2 more questions. Then from there, I'll hand over to Karl, who's going to give a remark about the session, and also Marcus will come in to wrap up as well. So I think maybe the question that I should pose at this time, Karl, is to say, at what point of the asset management implementation journey can one say, I have arrived? So yeah, that is the question, Karl.
That's also a loaded question, Teboho. It's like, you know, how long is a piece of string? I think the easy way and the short way to answer that is, first of all, you must know what your asset management objectives are. We saw in a couple of the presentations, the sort of flow, the line of sight flow from corporate, or in this case, the municipal objectives. Now, typically, all that service delivery would be very high on the agenda. I believe, I haven't worked there myself, but as a typical customer of a municipality, that for me would be a very high objective. That would translate into asset management terms, typically into something such as operational availability. And yeah, if those objectives are qualitatively known, then they need to be measured. Can't remember who mentioned that, but the importance of measuring with sensible and smart, to use the acronym that Floris referred to, KPIs is crucial. And I think it's as in one way as simple as that. If you have the objectives properly defined, measurement techniques and processes with KPIs, and you've reached those KPIs which are appropriate to the level of maturity of the specific municipality or organization, then you could say, right, I've achieved that. And obviously it won't be only one KPI, there'll be a number. Also those that would address the topics that Archie so eloquently referred to now, the end of life and the reinvestment elements. They also need to be addressed as objectives. So it's, yeah, I think that's probably the easy answer. Know your objectives, know how to measure them, and that'll give you a very good indication of whether your asset management system is working. I hope that'll do.
Yeah, no, clear. Thanks, Karl. And I think you can give some remark in terms of the session. And from there, we'll hand over to Marcus to come in as well.
Thank you. If I can briefly share a slide, I made a couple of points on that. Okay, let me find that. Right. So in terms of closing, I think the important thing is here, first of all, to thank the SAIEE and the AMEU for this opportunity to actually, let's call it, promote asset management, a topic which I'm passionate about and have been for many years. And my fellow colleagues on the asset management chapter of the SAIEE is something we believe in, and we're looking for opportunities to promote and, let's call it, evangelize our fellow electrical engineers about asset management, and this has served a valuable purpose for that. So thanks to them. And then, of course, also thanks to our learned colleagues, Teboho, Archie, Floris, and Abdul. It was great to hear your inputs. I think they were, from the chats that I've seen, it was well appreciated. So thanks for your efforts there and sharing your wisdom. And then just a couple of points. I think touching or starting with the theory that Archie presented, effectively all municipalities are in operate and maintain phase, regardless of where they are in the country, when they started, whatever. They have to operate to deliver services. They have to maintain their assets in order to ensure availability to operate. So you cannot, other than by start with the fundamentals. First of all, know what you have, what you're working with. Your asset info is critically important. It's a backbone of everything else. Do your work management, ideally via a CMMS. That's a fancy term. It could be as simple as an Excel system to start with. I've seen many organizations who run on Excel for many years, but that doesn't give you the long-term track record of data for decision making. So progressing to a CMMS is definitely ideal. The effective and efficient maintenance plans, they are crucial. A couple of times, even in the questions, we had the reference there to good preventive maintenance, taking the place and really extending asset lives to what they were meant and even beyond, often what they. And then very importantly, standardization of processes and procedures. And I want to think and say that this can be done across municipalities. It shouldn't have to be reinvented by every municipality. There should be platforms by which good best practices, standard procedures and processes can be shared. And I would think that the AMEU would be an ideal platform to do something like this. All three case studies highlighted the value of doing these fundamentals, but also the value of doing the strategic elements for the long-term sustainability. I think Floris clearly demonstrated the value of work management and all the other stuff that goes with it in the city of Cape Town. I was very impressed by what the work in the transmission department or section of Eskom, as Teboho demonstrated there, especially that point he made about the, I think it was, realizing value by the excellent decision making around refurbishment of assets. That is asset management really working in that element. And then, of course, Abdul, I think yours was less operational, but clearly, I think very good, if I can call it, tips for getting access to funding to afford what is often seen as a luxury, and not a compliance thing, but it deserves to be on that level. So yeah. I think that we got that.
Thanks, Karl. Yeah, I think in terms of time, thanks a lot. In terms of those remarks here,